Yes, we should record this webinar. So this webinar, this workshop is for people sign up for the self-review QA/QC process. That's why you're here. But also we're providing a lot of detailed information about the QA/QC. So if you watch this recording later on and try to learn about the QA/QC process, you're also in the right place. Stay with us. Today's schedule is as follows. We are going to just provide a quick overview about the QA/QC process, maybe just especially focusing on the self-review process, just a refresh what we know about the process. Then we are going to give a quick demonstration. I think it's easier way just jump into a real case, give you a demonstration about what to anticipate about this self-review process. Then we'll come back to talk about the QA/QC module and then some of the output you're going to review during the process. Then we'll have a longer Q&A for roughly 20 minutes. Unless we are going to talk about the next step. So after this meeting, so what to do about the data submission and what to anticipate about the self-review process, and also about the user feedback section. This workshop I mentioned will be recorded. We will put this recording and the presentation slide on the website afterward. So you don't have to memorize or keep note. Just try to stay with us, and you can always come back. During the workshop, if you have any question or any comment, just put it in the chat. One of us will be monitoring the chat, and also I think for today, because we have a small group, so I'm going to take a pause maybe during the each of the major break, so we can have a quick, maybe just a quick Q&A, not Q&A, a very quick break for a short question. Then we have a longer Q&A section later. Okay. So first, I think most of you have seen this figure for many times. Just remind everyone. So this is the data pipeline for the FluxMed half-hourly data for AmeriFlux data. So started with the submission from each one of you submit your data. Once the data gets submitted, it went through the format QA/QC module. We do a format QA/QC check. Then move on to the data QA/QC, focus on the real data, what's in there, and try to check any potential issue. If anything happened or anything be identified, will be returned to fix the issue correct, or maybe just for verification. If everything looks good, then we'll move on to the base publication. So if you want to know any detail about this workflow, or maybe what happened after the base publication, we do have a couple other webinars being recorded, and you can always check them on AmeriFlux website. For today's workshop, we'll be focusing on this the red box here, the data QA/QC. So let's break into this red box and see what's happening here. And this is a workflow within this QA/QC. What's happening right now. The file get passed by format QA/QC, then combined with whatever the previous base published by this site. So we combine this file, and this file, this process facilitated, so allow you to submit only the latest year, or maybe the last quarter of the data. You don't have to submit everything every time. Then the QA/QC module runs, the code runs, and then generate some of the output, table, figure, some of this information. And up to today, the M team will do a review when the QA/QC run finished. Then the review will be we try to synthesize every information into a report and return to the site team for correction, or maybe potential just verification about something we discover. If everything looks good, then move on to the base publication, like here. Okay. But there are certain consideration about the next phase, a couple things to think about it. The network growth, especially in the last couple of years, we're seeing a huge growth of the submission and new site join the network. increase of the submission. This figure shows roughly the growing trend of the next couple of years, right? We're seeing a growing trend of the site uploading the data every year. The total of the site published in AmeriFlux. We're also seeing a huge increase of the number of the submissions. So we are dealing with roughly 400 QAQC last 2 years per year. So think about the workload we're dealing with. So we have to move on to next stage of the QAQC. We cannot keep up whatever we're doing right now, even we love doing that. Another thing to think about it, we have to update this QAQC workflow while maintaining the service we are doing. We cannot just take a pause for half a year. Don't do anything. It's not feasible. Another thing is we heard from the community about people want to know more about the QAQC. They want to do even try to review some of the QAQC themselves, do an assessment. So we try to enable this feature in the next stage of the QAQC. The last thing is we want to scale up the QAQC module we currently have, given we are expanding the variable we're supporting. We're seeing a more diverse of ecosystem type, climate conditions. So we do need to adding new module to a QAQC, and we need a scalable workflow to do that. So this brings up the next stage will be this summer and fall about the QAQC, and we are calling this a self-review for a trained user. So what's new here? We'll be highlighting everything here. The first thing we change is we are asking volunteer like everyone here to participate in this self-review process. For the site participating in this process, once the QAQC module run, we are going to queue and send out the preliminary report to you. We are not going through this typical process. So we're going to send a report to you roughly immediately after we run a QAQC module. Then you take the self-review and decide it based on the information and also all the training we're talking about today, decide if anything need to be addressed through the correction, resubmit the data, or everything looks good, then we move on to the next stage. And we anticipate this process a lot of issues can be addressed immediately through this process. So we don't have to wait everything until our team review the data and return to you. And this might take a couple of weeks up to a month, or maybe sometimes might be longer. So I think this will facilitate the process. And also we're taking this opportunity to learn and do the user interview, user feedback section with you and try to understand how you're going to use this information we provided. And all this information will be used for future QAQC automation development. A couple of benefits. The first one for all of you today here will be, I think the first thing is to learn more detail about the QAQC, what's happening. And the first thing. Second would be enable the self-review and maybe a quick assessment of the data. Hopefully that lead to a faster publication of the data or turnaround of the data every time. But the benefit is also to the larger community, even they are not part of this process right now. But I think some of the things we're doing this summer will benefit a lot of people, a larger community. We are taking this summer exercise as an opportunity to learn again, users' feedback about what the next stage of the QAQC report should look like. And we also use this opportunity to evaluate and also maybe fine-tune some of the check and the criteria for each of the module, and hopefully everything here will be lead to a more automatic QAQC next year we're targeting. So let's take a look about the new self-review email. I guess most of you are familiar with the typical QAQC email in the last couple of years. So you probably see something very similar, right? You have this is an email with a title about your submission and summary of the QAQC written. The new addition will be in red here. So instead of the synthesize issue here, we are just providing the link to each of the summary statistic table for each of the module. We're going to talk about each of them and in detail later, but this will be the link to all the statistics generated by each of the module. And we also provide a link to a technical note. We're writing everything we talk about today and also a detail of the module in a technical note. So you have a chance to look into this in detail and learn about the process when you do the self-review. Here's the quick look of the summary statistic table look like. Don't worry about the detail. We're going to demonstrate and show you a real table, but the general idea is each of the table, each module is going to generate one table, and the table will be organized by year variable and a higher level result and some of the supporting statistic here. Then each of them will have a link to the figure we generate on FTP. So this is roughly the structure we'll be seeing through this presentation. Okay. Last thing about the overview here will be we are preparing a technical note for the QA/QC the module, and here's just a snapshot of the technical note. Here we are providing an overview and workflow. Whatever we'll talk today will be in the document. And we also, for each of the module, we're going to talk about some of the detail, including the figure and what each of the figure means, and the table and what the definition of the statistic and the result mean, and the rule about leading to some of the result here. So you will have a chance when you do a review to take up this technical document along with you. So the next thing we are going to do is just jump into a demonstration. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Daniel is going to take over. Do a quick demonstration.
Yeah, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'm just going to walk through the different steps we anticipate you might take in going through the self-review process. Everyone will do things a little different, so keep in mind to make this workflow work best for you. So this is just an example. So just a reminder that you'll start by uploading your new or your new data for the quarter or the year, whatever you're going to submit for this self-review session starting next month. So just a reminder, you do that through the regular upload data work page using the half-hourly. I'm sure many of you remember what this looks like. So then within a week or two, you're going to expect to get the email that Housen showed you in your inbox. So you'll be looking for, now I'm showing you a test example, so ignore this word test, but you'll be looking for the AmeriFlux QA/QC, a number for your site with the dates showing what uploads were used in this QA/QC run. So you'll be getting this email, and let's step through how you might use it. So I'm going to actually go down to the right one here. So as Housen mentioned, you'll see it's got some introductory material with some links. This first one here is pointing to an overall description of the data QA/QC process online that's there available for you for some additional information. And here, right here, is the link to this technical note that Housen mentioned. So again, this will be a straight download, and you'll get the PDF that you can then open. I'll come back to this note during this example here, but just you'll want to download that and have that available if you don't already haven't, once you get the email. Okay, so the idea here is that you'll need to step through each of these links to have a look at the output from the QA/QC run. And so let's do that. So the first one I'm going to work on here is the time step alignment. Now this module is designed to check to see if you have any misalignments in timestamps for your radiation variables. So let's just go ahead and click that. It's going to take you, now again, this is dependent on what browser you're using, but this is I'm using Safari here, and this shows you this is a CSV file immediately. Some other browsers, you'll actually download the CSV file. So if you're comfortable looking at it in this form, you can go ahead and use use it in this manner. And what you're looking for here is in this result column, you're looking for anything that's not okay. So you can see here in the first two rows, we have warnings. So the first thing you might do is like, okay, let me just see what that is going to look like. So I'm just going to copy, in this case, going to copy this link. Going to open, readjust this a little bit here. Open a new tab. Put the link in. And there we go. There's the figure that was generated for 2011. You can see here. So what I'm looking for in this figure is immediately jumps out at me are these two highlighted points. And I'm like, okay, so that's probably something's going on there. And when you're looking, Howson will go through this later on, but what you're really looking for here are multiple windows that have flagged points showing up. So you're looking for trends or shifts that are occurring in time to look for shifts like maybe your logger was off a half hour, or maybe there's a repeated shade pattern happening throughout parts of the day or parts of the year. So that's really what we're looking for. But because it's only happening in this one window, you probably can, in this case, decide, maybe this is okay. It's just happening in one window. Those are just some weird random blips in the data. I think this is, okay for this site. So let's go back to our CSV here. And again, we do recommend and I want you to have a look at every row that has, like you really want to go through this and make sure you kind of look at all the warnings and any fails. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this second figure for 2012. And again, I see down here, there's just one little blip down here. I'm going to say, okay, something, I might go back to my data, to my notes and say, okay, we had a small sensor malfunction on one day, and maybe I'll clean that data up, or maybe I say, oh, it's just okay. We expect that at this site. But the idea is that you need to go through each of the rows here that have a warning or a fail and have a look at the figure and potentially look at these statistics. Because these are just one-off points, I'm going to say we don't really need to look at these statistics in this case, but that's the idea. Okay, so we had a look at the time step alignment. And so we're just going to, what you want to do is just go through each one of these. Here we have the percent ratio check, and we can look, everything's okay. So this is kind of the workflow you want to think about doing. So let's jump down to the multivariate comparison test here. Okay, so we can see here, this looks like a mess. I can't read this. So let's say in this case, you actually want to download the file. So you can do that in Safari. You just right click on the link, and then you can download the linked file. So I already did that. And then I opened it in a spreadsheet, reader, just using numbers here, but Excel, or you could open it in Google Docs, etc. So here is an easier version probably to read. But again, I'm going to start off by scanning this result column and try to pick out, okay, where are the rows without that aren't saying okay. So okay, I found one here. So this is in the multivariate comparison, this test is designed to do is to take two variables that should track each other and should have some predictable relationship. And so in this case, we're looking at wind speed and U star is where this warning is happening in 2011. So you can see here that it's kind of describing what data we're looking at. So I'm just going to go ahead again, start off by clicking on the figure to see, well, what does this look like? Okay, here it is. Can everyone see that okay? Okay, so, okay, something's going on here. So in this case, I'm going to take a moment to look at the technical note to try to figure out, okay, how do I evaluate this figure that I'm looking at, when the statistics that maybe I can look at to help me understand what's going on. So I'm going to jump over the technical note and go down to the multivariate comparison model here. So you know, take a moment to read the technical note, try to understand this test a little bit better, look at the example figures. And then what's really I want to point y'all to this morning is this summary table, where I'm actually going to make this a little smaller. Let's see. So we can see it a little more. So this table here is describing what each, what is in the columns here. So I'm going to have a look at first, maybe the criteria for the result, trying to understand what would have caused this warning here. So it's any of these below. So I have an R squared of the relationship of those two variables would be less than 0.7 or 0.5 for WS and U star. So that's what we're looking at. So I want to check and see if my R squared is below. And also I want to see if my PXY, so these are outlier points that are beyond a certain percentage of the predicted relationship, or the absolute value of, if I have many years of data, we're also looking at the change in slope over the years. And so that's something I'll let y'all read more about, but I would want to start off by looking at these statistics and trying to see where is the test giving me a warning. So let's go back to the table here. And I'm looking here at the regression slope, and sure enough, here my R squared, it's below that 0.5 threshold. So that's what's happening. That's what's causing me probably to get that outlier, or that warning. So let's have a look again. Okay, so kind of just eyeballing this, you might so the R squared, you can see like, okay, you can see this kind of set of points are probably causing that R squared to be quite low. And it almost looks like a bimodal relationship here. So thinking back about this site, I know that in this year, there was a harvest. And so that could explain why we're seeing this bimodal pattern. And that's perfectly acceptable for this site. We know that the relationship might change during that period of regrowth for the site. Okay, great. So we kind of have an understanding of what's going on here. And again, it's expected. Okay, so let's say we finished looking through and we didn't find anything else. So the last thing I'm going to check here is this variable coverage figure to have a look at just the data. If the data that that I thought I uploaded looks like what the AMP team is seeing in the review process. And so this figure is showing the coverage for each of the variables for each of the years of data. So I can see, okay, this looks, pretty good. The numbers here are the percentage. So again, if you have missing values, the -999s, that's what we're checking against here, of how many are actual values, how many are the missing values. And I can see that, oh yeah, I had very little methane data in the first 2 years, and we took the sensor out in 2013. That's what I'm expecting. So everything's looking pretty good. So once you go through that whole process, the next step here is to reply to the AMP team, reply to this, this email. So all you need to do is hit reply. You'll notice there's sometimes you just don't pay attention to where the email is coming from, because it can have some weird names on it, but just go ahead and hit reply and it'll go to the right place. And then what you want to do is just send a short note to the AMP team that you finished the review. And in this case, all looks okay. But we need to understand, if you have gotten some warnings or failures, you need to justify why those are okay. So just give us a little note saying, again, for this case, why the time step alignment is off. And it's just, there's a couple weird points because of blah, 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 and it's expected. And then here's a note about the multivariate comparison, about the harvest that occurred, and it's all good. And that's what we need. So in this case, we'd be able to go ahead and have a look and publish a quick look at this note, and then go ahead and publish the data for you. So that's kind of an example of a workflow. I want to point out a few more things that are in this email just for your reference while we're looking at it. The first is this, actually, this first link here, I'm not going to click on it, but because it's dependent on what sites that you're affiliated with it. But this is a little dashboard that will show you the status of your sites, where they are in the workflow, whether they're in QA/QC or past QA/QC and waiting for a data QA/QC run. Again, you do have to log in and you have to be affiliated with a site to see this. So give us a heads up if you don't see what you're expecting here, but that's a good resource for you. The next thing I want to show you is while these links here in the bulleted list take you directly to the statistic table, you can get to the whole FTP output directory by that link, where you can see like this is the output, the figures for each test all in one place. Here's all the summary CSV files all together in one place. Here's that variable coverage figure. We do two, one by year. This is the one you actually want to look at. But anyway, you can kind of get it all together in one spot by this output link. So that might be handy for some of you that just want to navigate yourselves through the FTP there. And then finally, these are links to the format QA/QC reports that where the files that were combined to make this complete record using this data run. You can find the links to these the reports for those uploads here, just in case you need to reference it in future. So I think that's all I have here for the demo. I think we can take some questions, or Housen or Rachel, if you want to add anything, feel free.
Yeah, I think we can take a pause for a quick question. I do see one coming from Bill Munger. So, so Bill mentioned about how about formalizing the response about the warning. So the explanation get attached to the data node for user to see.
Bill, can you say a bit more about what you are thinking here?
Yeah, I was thinking that, if there was some way to, hold on, on mute, that there was a way to use a common syntax or put that in somehow capture those notes that you put, so that a user would. So, for example, in your example where there was a harvest in 1 year, somehow that the site teams note that, hey, there was a harvest in 2011, and that made a change, so that would not just go to the AMP team, but somehow get that into some kind of README file that goes with the data, so that a user go, oh, well, there was a harvest, that's why.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I will take note of that. Ideally, the site team would have filled out some BATM information about that harvest, so that information was in BATM as well, but we'll think about how we can have just notes potentially for data users as well. It gets a bit hairy, anyway, we'll thank you. We'll think on that and consult BATM for this.
Yeah, it needs to have some sort of syntax control or something,
right.
So it's not just a free form thing that people can't search for.
Right.
Or some way to flag you back to saying, hey, did you get that into the BATM?
Right, that's a good point as well. Yeah,
just some check that say, oh yeah, you mentioned that in the BATM, or no, you didn't. Do you want to add that there?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great suggestion.
I see two questions. One from Sarah Knox about the code. Yes, we're going to make the code public. So wait
Stay
for it.
tuned.
Stay
Yeah.
tuned. Wait for it. Another question for Colin. Colin, want to speak up about what you're asking? I think the question is about the learning process. So assuming we are.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I see that there could be, you know, potentially quite a bit of email exchange as we try to like figure out some of these things. And I guess I assume that's okay as part of the learning process that we're all going to go through, and you know, kind of building our knowledge. Is that kind of expected if I have to send 15 emails to you guys?
Yes, it's totally okay. So that's what I'm calling an experimental process this summer. I don't know what to anticipate, but I think we'll be learning much more after this summer, I guess. Yeah, I think you bring up a very important point about. So we are taking this opportunity to learn about how user is going to approach the report like this, right? So this is kind of the first card. So we have a very basic information, take a lot of training, and it might be hard to understand sometimes, but we want to understand how people approach this so we can build whatever QQC report for the next stage. And that's important because a lot of people might be new, they're running new site, or maybe they don't submit the data regularly. So it'll be even harder for them to understand what's going on. So hopefully we can take this opportunity to learn how to build that for future. Any other question? I'm going to switch to my screen. If no question, let's move on to the next part of the workshop. So I think Daniel give a quick intro and demonstration about what's going on, and she also mentioned some of the module detail. So in the next maybe 20 minutes, I'm going through all the module we have right now, the design of them, the figure, maybe also show you some of the summary statistic table. For the interest of time, I probably won't go into detail for each one of them. That's a documentation will be ready for you to read when you have time. I'm just try to walk you through about how we design this thing and maybe show you one in detail, and let's move on. Okay. First of all, let's talk about a QQC design for AmeriFlux pipeline. So first, I think this is a secondary independent check. This is important. We are not doing your job. I think a lot of QQC need to be done before this happen, and when you have all the information you need to do the quality control. Here we're just doing a secondary independent check, and hopefully we can capture something you probably miss, or maybe we can take another higher level of view, because we're seeing a lot of different sites. So we have some other information you're probably missing at a single site. So the idea here with the methodology we're following is by the paper by Gilberto Pastorella in 2014. And a lot of this is developed during the FluxNet 2015 data processing, collaborated by AmeriFlux team and also ICO's team. We also take some of the lesson we learned from the network about, okay, what is common issue seen by in the past data set, and let's try to capture that issue in the future data submission. We're also taking into account the feedback from the data user. This is important. and also some of the feedback for the further processing. So the data doesn't stop at the base release, right? So we do have a further processing in one flux processing. So sometimes break, and we have to take into consideration about try to capture that earlier as possible. We adopt a post hoc approach. This is what I just mentioned earlier. So because a long history of the AmeriFlux data repository, so sometimes we don't have all the information we need to do the QAQC, right? So all the ancillary information, all the diagnostic, we probably don't have that. And we have to operate based on without those information on the side. Another thing is the trade-off between a very site-specific and universal. We're dealing a lot of site coming from different ecosystem, different climate zone. So sometimes we have to take a more universal approach. Sometimes, but we have to go specific if possible. Last is you probably will notice we emphasize the visualization a lot, and this is just for not only for issue identification, but also for communication with the team. You can think about a lot of QAQC email back and forth, so it's easier to understand what's going on through the figure. So whatever issue module we're running, typically it comes with a figure. Okay. The QAQC workflow we adopted in when we processed FluxNet 2015. And also all the base been published since 2017. So it's roughly, here's a number about how many QAQC review we've been doing the last 5 years already. And here are the 6 modules we're currently running right now. I'm going through each one of them in the next 10 or 20 minutes. So for the next a couple slides, I'm going through a template like this. So you have a check module. And first, I'm going to talk about the issue we're targeting for each of the module, and what is we're going to show a couple example figure about the module. Then this time, I'm going to show you also the summary statistic table. Daniel just show you a few of them. I'm going through each one of them. Last, I'm going to show you some information about the target variable for each one of them. So first is a timestamp alignment check. Daniel just showed you an example earlier. So this check is try to identify any misalignment of the timestamp, or it could be due to time zone, or maybe a starting ending day of the timestamp. Sometimes could be due to a daylight saving time, or sometimes just the data stream is coming from a multiple logger. They are not synchronized in some case. And we try to identify this type of issue. And this check is start with the calculate the potential incoming radiation for the site. So this is kind of the top of the atmosphere radiation calculated by the site's geolocation and also the time zone. The time zone is specified by the time pattern. So when you reduce a site, there's a time zone specification of the site. We're using that to calculate your potential incoming radiation. Once we have the potential incoming radiation, this is 1 year of data. We calculate for each of the 15-day window, we calculate the maximum diurnal composite of the potential incoming radiation and all your observed radiation in this case. And this step is try to get the clear sky condition of this 15-day window, right? As you can see in this figure here, because we are doing the maximum composite, we're getting a much clearer shape of the radiation and for further comparison. And this is an example. And once we get this, we calculate this composite for each of the 15-day windows through the year. Then we generate a new time series here. So this is a new time series. Then a couple of things we do is first we do a cross correlation between these two time series. We try to find if there's any lag between these two. Ideally, there's no lag. That means they're aligned perfectly. We also calculate because sometimes if you miss, because of the gap of the data, we cannot calculate there's missing window, whatever. We cannot calculate this cross correlation. So additionally, we also calculate the percentage of the occasion when your major radiation exceed the potential incoming. I'm going to show you an example later. So these are the two types of statistics we're calculating to justify the issue. In this case, I'm showing here, this is the perfect line, and there are you don't see any point above the potential incoming radiation. So this is no issue identified here. The next one, the next example I'm showing here, right? You can see clearly there's a shift between the major radiation compared to a potential incoming radiation. And based on the cross correlation, the time lag, there are a lag of 2, and this is half-hourly data. So that's a roughly 1 hour shift in the timestamp. And also there are, you see here, roughly 30 to roughly 30% of the point they're exceeding the potential incoming radiation being flagged as highlighted here. So both of these statistics support, yeah, that's very likely there's a shift in your timestamp compared to the local standard time. It depends on the nature of the shift. If there's a consistent shift across all the window in a year, it's likely either you have a misinterpretation of the ending or starting time of your timestamp. If your shift is longer than half hour or 1 step, maybe 1 hour, 2 hour, and there might be some mismatch between the time zone and your the timestamp you use in your data. Sometimes we see inconsistent shift across the window, so there might be indication of the daylight saving, or maybe just resetting your clock at a certain of the time. So something like this can help you to understand what's going on. And here is the table I think Daniel just showed you earlier, and this is a you're going to see this in the technical note too. I'm going to try to tell you each of the column and to understand what's going on. So the table is typically structured by period, so year, and by variable. And we're going to show a higher level result. And this is in pink, in red here. I'm going to talk about this later. Then, so this is kind of the higher level result Daniel just showed earlier, right? So it could be fail, it could be warning, it could be okay. If okay means the check didn't identify anything need your attention. If fail, it means it's very likely, based on our preview, based on the criteria here, likely there's certainly data issue being identified. You need to take a look of what's going on here. Warning is more like a borderline, so there might be something, but the check is not definitely, and you want to take a look, interpret the result, use your best knowledge, especially of the site. Okay, and for each of the check, we're going to provide a supporting statistic we use to define the result here. So for example, I just showed you earlier, time lag, cross correlation, we use here. The number of the point, the percentage of the point exceeding the potential incoming radiation, both daytime and nighttime, and last corresponding link to this variable and this year will be provided here. Okay, so this is a typical structure of the table we are going to show. The detail might vary module by module, but this is the kind of the format we are following. So what you typically do is you go to the table and you first just take a look of the result column, make sure there are nothing fail or nothing warning. If anything return warning or fail, you want to take a look of the statistic here, maybe go to a link to see the figure. If necessary, just take a look of the technical note to understand what's going on. I want to say a little bit about the criteria here we're using. So I won't go into detail for each one of them. So we define some of these criteria based on our experience in the last 5 years, I say. So we've been doing a review for a lot of the data submission, and we've been trying to find a balance about where and how to set this criteria. To enable we capture some of the likely issue, but not to flag everything, not to return warning for a lot of things. But we're still learning about this criteria. So that's what everyone here can help us. So if you doing your self-review process, if you find some of these criteria might be too sensitive or maybe too not too sensitive, need to be tuned a little bit, please feedback and let us know. We're going to fine tune this a little bit, and this will help us to build the next stage of the automatic QQC report. Okay. So timestamp is the most difficult one to understand. The rest of the module will be easier to follow. The physical range, just we try to set a boundary of the higher and lower bound for each of the variable. So this is based on one is based on the physical likely range, and we know that. Or if we don't know that, we are going to build this based on the distribution of all the data we're seeing from across the network, and that's what we did in the last couple of years. And we flag the point and calculate the percentage of the outlier per year. One thing to note is we do set a buffer zone here. So we have two different thresholds here because we are seeing a lot of variable, for example, like a PPFD here. We all know that's it's pretty common. The sensor returns something like a little bit negative. And if you don't, some people prefer not to set everything to 0 or maybe cut everything out. That's totally fine. We know that. So for some of this variable, we do allow the buffer zone and to allow the point be flagged. It's okay. Let's take a look at the table here, right? This is the most straightforward one. This is there are two tables returned by physical range. One is the threshold we just talked about, year variable, the result, a number of a point, a flag above the buffer zone, so it's much beyond the limit. And the soft flag here, sorry, the soft flag here means a little bit over the range, but still within the buffer zone. So in determining the result, we're using both, and depends on the variable. Nature of the variable, we are setting the threshold here. Another table return here will be just a percentage ratio. This is only applied to the variable that should be in the percentage, like a relative humidity, soil water content, something like that. We're checking if you submit the data in percentage or in a ratio fraction. And this should be easier to understand. The next module will be Diurnal-Seasonal Pattern check. This is similar to the physical range check we just did, right? Only thing slightly different here will be the how we organize the data. Instead of by time series, now we are organized everything into a monthly diurnal way. Okay, so this is a 1 year of data, and we are grouping the data by month. So this is January, and this might be June. And for each month, we are doing the diurnal-seasonal plot here, something like here. So this is by hour of the day for this month. And what we did is for each of the site, if you have any published space in the past, we harvest the historical range of this variable, and for this month. And you can see for each of the hour here. So we're building a historical range based on your previous published base for this variable. And when you have a new submitted data for this year, we're checking the new data against the historical range. And we're using a 2.5, 25, 50%, and 75% to 97.5% as a series of the threshold we're checking. And we're checking how many of data points actually fall in within the, let's say, 25 to 75%, or how many of the points beyond this 95% range of your previous record. If the percentage is kind of off, and we're going to return a warning or a fail message here. And And for this case, what we detect is you can see clearly the new submitted data has a flat sign convention in this case. So all the point is not falling within the previous range. When you have a longer record of the data, this check could be useful to check if the last year or maybe the last few years falling with the range of your previous record. In this case, this is a long way outgoing long way radiation. And we're checking the last year, 2021. As you can see in this figure, a lot of points are actually higher than the 95% in the previous record. So this got flagged as a warning or fail. And in this case, if you look at the long-term time series of this site, you notice, yeah, the full range of this variable is much higher in this year. So the table for this module is similar. So it's by year, by variable, and by the result. The result criteria is listed here. And the statistic will be, we just mentioned earlier, number of the point within 95%, beyond 95% or within the interquartile range. We also calculate, similar to the timestamp alignment check, we also calculate the time lag, cross correlation, make sure they are kind of aligned with the previous record. And the criteria is here. Okay. The next module will be the multivariate comparison, as Daniel mentioned about this module. So we compare two variables, especially the variable that share certain relationship physically. And we try to check if the relationship deviate a certain period of the time or maybe a certain year of the record. And a couple of things we're checking. And this can be used to identify if the sensor is malfunction for a short period of time, or maybe one of them got contaminated, like shaded, or maybe something like that. And the check is performed by, this is two variable showing PPFD and the show incoming as an example. And we try to compare this, this is a scatter plot of these two variable. Then we calculate the regression of these two variables. And based on the regression, we try to flag the point that's relative deviate from this relationship and flag this point. And we also calculate the percentage of this point per year. So in determining the issue, we're using all this statistic here. Another issue can be identified through this check would be if you have longer data. We also check the change of the slope over a year in this case, right? Again, this is a PPFD compared to show incoming radiation. The show incoming radiation, if you look at the peak of the value in the summer, they're pretty stable over the year. But the PPFD kind of shift, right? In the first couple of years, they kind of decrease a little bit and shift back. And the last 3 years is totally different. In this case, that's the sensor got degraded and they recalibrate the sensor, then replace the sensor in the last 3 years. And we're using the slope of this regression over the year to check if there's any shift or maybe any trend in your one of the variable over the year. And this could be important to identify either sensor degradation, or maybe you have a replacement of the sensor, or sometimes you just move your sensor in a different location. A table here is slightly different from the previous one. We have two variables. So we have, again, you have a year, you have two, variable one, variable two. But similarly, you still have a result here showing a fail, warning, okay. And we have all the statistics I just mentioned earlier, the slope, the R square, deviation of the slope, and the number of the point being flagged as outlier. And in this module, we do have two different figures. So one is to the previous time series scatter plot I just showed. Another one is to the this one. So the change of the slope over the year, you will see. The next module will be used filtering, and this is straightforward. So this is just to check, make sure the CO2 flux is not being filtered by the U-star, and this is kind of a requirement for further one flux processing. So I won't go into detail about this module. The table here will be similar, right? We have two variables. So what FC variable is being checked, U-star variable being checked, the result, and also the statistic here, and also a figure link. The last module will be just data coverage. This is just to check about a couple of things, right? So as the figure show here, demonstration about a couple example, and this is a visualization way to understand and have a quick understanding about your data, right? Are there any gap year with no data at all, like this case? Or are there any variable they just not provided for many years, like in this case, this not, for example, this is not measured, so this is there's no data is anticipated. Another case would be, yeah, you do have a measurement, but because you submit the data every year, so somehow you forget to include some of the variable in this couple of years. So it's easier, a quick way to understand, okay, so what my data coverage look like, and am I missing anything here? Another thing I want to point out is here, we try to highlight in bold some of the mandatory variable for one flux processing. So take a look, for example, like a CO2, FC, make sure this variable, they are consistent and have a good coverage over the year. Okay, I'm finished all the module, and hopefully everyone can follow, or maybe have some idea about all the module design, figure, table, and where to look for if you came to a summary statistic like this. Let's take a pause for question.
I have a question.
Please feel free to raise your hand or ask question. Stephanie, go ahead.
For the variable coverage table, yeah, it's really cool to see it by year. I was wondering if we'll also be able to break it down like by month in the future. And for long sites, I know that would kind of be an overwhelming table, but I don't know, maybe it's something we could toggle for certain years if we see, oh, it's missing more data than I expected. Can I break down that year more by month?
Yeah, that's an interesting, good idea. I'll be curious about how to use that. Sure, we're going to take that into consideration. Any other question?
I have a second question, if nobody else has one. When we resubmit historical data, like say I found an error in my camera data that I was submitting last year and I want to resubmit it this year. When I resubmit it, will it overwrite the historical data, or do I need to say something specific like I'm resubmitting data that I found errors in before?
Daniel, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, it will overwrite your historical data. So just generally, so everyone understands, when we do that that file combiner that takes all your data and combines to make your whole record, we look per timestamp at the most recent data submitted, and we use that timestamp for. So for example, you really have to like it. And we rewrite the entire timestamp. So if you, for example, gave us 20 variables in a submission for say all of 2011, if you say like, oh, there was 1 month in 2011 where I need to replace the data for a sensor that was messed up. If you actually just sent us that month's worth of data with just that variable, we would overwrite all 20 variables for that month as missing and only use the values for that replacement variable. So it's really, you got to think about it per timestamp is what's being replaced for whatever the latest you send us. So that's why we say when, if you want to give us soil temperature data, that's through your whole record. We actually have to have you give us the entire full record again for all your variables, because that most recent submission will overwrite everything per timestamp. So we can take further questions about that, but that's how the system is designed, and it allows our automation allows us to track everything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Russell, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think this is really great. Kudos to you guys for making these tools available. I think a lot of us have built our own QA QC process, but we all do slightly different things. And also people that have not done that yet, then they don't have to go out and recreate the wheel. So making these tools available for everybody is really a great idea. And I also I think I'll probably even revamp my QA QC process in the sense that if I can submit it and just get your reports and then look at those, then I can kind of bypass my own QA QC process and use your more comprehensive checks to look at the data. My only issue might be that I don't really know what a lot of people are going to be kind of overwhelmed with what to do about like little errors of, you know, something out of range, or, you know, I guess out of range errors, those are pretty easy to deal with. But the more like time shift switching or the multivariate comparison, certainly drifts and PAR are going to be a big part of it, and compared to solar radiation. So just like really, I think it can also be kind of overwhelming. Like, well, there's just way too much to look at, and then kind of going like, what do I do? Or is that going to detract people from submitting their data?
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Well, thanks for the comment. First of all, I think, well, I don't think we're going to replace your QQC code. I think the design is very different. So I think a lot of QQC still need to be done with the information you have. So I don't anticipate we're going to replace the QQC job you've been doing. So first of all, the second part is, I think second part is why we're launch this process as a two-step. So we're not just do the QQC report for everyone this year. And we are trying to do first step about we invite all the trend user, or maybe the returning side first, because you guys have more experience about dealing in QQC. So hopefully you have better understanding about what's going on, and maybe less hassle to understand when you see a QQC report. And we first step, we try to invite, especially the site with returning site. So that means you have published base before, you're just adding 1 year, maybe adding 2 year, or maybe 3 months of data at once. So you don't have to deal with 15 years of data and with all the possible issue coming to a report at once. So that's why we try to take this step first. And we want to learn, we have a user feedback session, try to understand so how you approach this and how you deal with all this information. Then we can try to build something. There won't be an ugly table like this in the future. There might be something, a better report, I don't know, but it will be easier for people to understand. The last thing I want to say is, I think it's important you mentioned, one thing you mentioned is pretty important, is not just identify the issue, but also how to address the issue will be also important. I think we need to spend some effort about, we learned about this a lot in the last couple of years, helping people to understand the issue, but also try to correct the issue and what's a possible way to go forward. So we need to write this down about, for example, if you have a shift of the radiation, so what? What can you do? What's a possible way to address this, about dealing with this issue? So yes, I think there are more to be done on this well. But thanks for all your comment and support. Yep.
I want to point out one thing I forgot to mention in my demo, and I'm just going to share my screen really quickly so y'all can see it. In this technical report, one thing Howson's done an amazing job of doing. So after the description of the statistics table, he's put together a table of what types of errors what some of the statistics that might lead to specific types of errors that are what might be causing the issue. So so just keep an eye out for when you're doing the self-review, if you're looking at the statistics and trying to figure out what would cause it. Howson's synthesized, his 5 years experience of doing this to try to get a sense of the underlying cause of the issues that might be happening. So that's there and available for you.
We do have a couple questions coming from the chat, but before that, Greg, I think you raised your hand earlier, right?
Yeah, well, two things. For us that have really, really long-term data sets, I know I see Dennis, Russ on here, myself, is that as the repository evolves and changes, will there be implementation if data streams are asked to change, where those, or thoughts about how that could automatically be done in the future, instead of coming back to us and saying, oh, we're going to change kind of our formats. Can you go back and change everything going back? I've worked on sites since 2000. And I know a few years ago, I was on a panel at the Biosphere where there was talk of putting all our raw data in the cloud, and anytime there was changes either with protocols or processing algorithms, that since the whole network's raw data would be in the cloud, this could be done automatically, and there would be historical data sets and new data sets. Has there been any progress on that?
I'm going to take a pass on the first question. So anyone else want to take a second one, please feel free to. Greg, I think your case is, it's pretty unique. So that's why I sent you a separate email about how we're going forward with your case, okay. Right? So yeah, you do have a previous record. It's published before our QQC or format standard in place. So we do. You are not the only case. We do offer some of the help for some of this long-running site and try to deal with this mismatch of the format and anything else. So, so look out for my email. Let's try to get it resolved. And we want to have your new latest data coming to.
More is coming now. And then the next thing is, for us who have been doing this for a long time, it might be beneficial too that there be, to help more junior scientists just starting this, maybe a repository where we can provide our code for our initial QA QC, or building the files, right, and doing these initial before they even send them to you, just so they have that extra help. We have files or our code to merge metadata to the flux or so forth, depending on the code. Maybe there's a place that we as a community could deposit that to help more junior scientists.
Yeah, I'm taking a pass, but I think someone, I think a lot of people here, Sarah is here too. Some other people should speak up. Yeah, I think we need more volunteer to do this. We're kind of stretched. So we do our best to do our part. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, so one of the goal, not the main goal, but one of the small goal of this exercise is try to open this process a little bit. And so people, like Russ just mentioned, so people can use this as a tool actually. So you're not submitting data and waiting the report from us, but you're actually treating this like a way of getting a near real-time feedback of your QQC. And if you learn about the process, you can just use it as a tool, one of the tools you're using. And we definitely need a community to step up and contribute the code, doing other things. So we do have a couple questions coming from the chat. Let me take a quick look. Dennis, you want to speak up?
Yeah, I'm trying to turn things on here. Oops. Hi, good morning. Thanks for all this great work and stuff. One thing I've always advocated for is to try to get more feedback and extra pair of eyes from data users, because I think we all know that we have so many data strings and it's hard to catch everything perfectly. But we need to have some way that if someone's using the data, they start seeing things that are outliers to be able to report back, so then we could iterate. And so I guess that's kind of my long-term hope and recommendation. So, and Greg makes a good point, but I guess I've always pushed back on always having to rechange our names, and it's like whack-a-mole. I mean, if someone wants to change titles, this is what databases are for. And I don't think it should be on the onus of the PIs and their team who are producing all the data that every year or two have to change arbitrary names just because someone has a different opinion. Databases can relabel things, and we should use them for that, and save us some time. So those are kind of my 2 points.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. I can take the first one, I guess. Yeah, I don't think we have a formal way for data user to report an issue right now. There's something, maybe something we can look into for future. But I want to mention that we do some of the issue, and maybe some of the module we're using right now is because of the feedback from the user. So we're tightening up a little bit based on the feedback about some of the issue we missed in the past. So we're adding a couple of module right now to capture that. Another is occasionally we do receive the information from the data user about a certain site might have some data might be problematic. And usually we feedback all this information back to the QQC process. So maybe some of you might receive the information like this, like an email. Maybe I send later. It's feedback from the user. So yeah, we try to capture whenever possible. Yeah, one comment from Tyler is about this is in response to Russ's comment about says it would be possible to compile some example about how people deal with the different type of error and include that as an appendix to the technical note we have. Yeah, this is a great idea. So we'll be work in progress, and the document is not finished yet. So yes. Hopefully we can add that. Sarah, please.
Yeah, thank you guys for all your really hard work. I know this is no small feat. Just going back to Gregory's comment about, I mean, I know you guys have on and I was just trying to look for it, various links to some code that folks have online. Is there a way that people who want to share, their GitHub links or something like that, we could just like have a resource page, like add that to the FluxNet page or AmeriFlux, just so that it's easy to find, if I, incoming students or new PIs say, oh, what's available out there, rather than look each individual PI, there's sort of a list of, and people can contribute it to it voluntarily. With a disclaimer that we, don't necessarily provide any technical support, but the code's available.
Yeah, we do have something. Yeah, I put it in the link in the chat. That's a link to the resources package library people share about flux processing. So you might find some of them useful too.
Yeah, just so that PIs can add to that as well, and different groups can add to that.
Sure.
Great, thanks.
Stephen mentioned about a question about for a new site, first base submission with a QQC module run okay. Can those sites participate in this self-review process? Yes, I'm going to talk about this in the next part of the presentation. I think the answer will be yes. New sites still can participate in this process. But as we talk about this, sorry, I probably skipped that. So some of the module won't run if this is a new site. For example, like a Diurnal-Seasonal check, right? I mentioned the check is based on the historical range of your published base. And so we apply a certain range of the check to your data. But if you don't have any previous published base, that means we don't have a range to check that. So also means we don't have that run. And yeah, I think that's answer the question. Another one. So definitely mention about yeah, I'm going to answer that in the next page. Okay. So Daniel, Rachel, please capture whatever in the chat. I think we should move on to the last part of the presentation. So in the next few slides, we're going to talk about what's next. Okay, the schedule, what to expect for the next stage. The first thing is the timeline. Okay, so today is the training webinar. After this training webinar, what we need from you is to confirm you're going to participate in this process, and the site ID of the site will be on the list. So we are going to follow up with email. So please confirm the site ID you want to be in this process. This will be the site list will be used to in this step, right? So if the site is on the list, when you submit the data, when we finish the QQC run, this preliminary report we just showed you earlier will be sent to you. Otherwise, every other submission will go through a typical the data workflow here. And I want to mention again is typical. I think we designed this process for returning site, especially a site with previous published base and with no current pending issue right now. And this is because this is easier to understand the latest report. Otherwise, if you're a new site, you're submitting 5 years of data or maybe 10 years of data at once, it might be overwhelming, try to look at all this information at once. So, but for new site, it's okay if you, after this training, if you're comfortable about doing this, we definitely welcome you to be in this process, okay? In July to September would be the self-review process. We plan to kick off on July 11, the Monday. This is because we are tidying up a few loose ends in our code, so make sure we can run this process smoothly. So if you're planning to submit your data, please hold on for now until July 11, then you can submit your data as planned. Okay, then and talk about detail in the next slide. So if you receive the email, do the QQC review and user information. Some of the site you might be contacted by us do the user in the individual feedback section, not all of them. So this is only for some of them. If you got contact, please respond to the email and try to find, we'll try to find a time with you to do the feedback section. And last is we currently plan to have a re-evaluate workshop maybe in October after we run, everyone got a chance to submit the data once and being through the process. And we come back again together and try to talk about this and see how the next QQC workflow should be. a couple of things this could be useful for you. So if you're ready to submit your data, so what happened next? First, submit your data through a typical data upload page. This is a typical workflow. We just need your site ID beforehand. That's it. For some of the site, if you got contact, participate in the individual user feedback section. Reply to an email when you receive it. Again, once you submit your data, be prepared to receive an email about QQC with a number. And this will be a QQC email Daniel just showed earlier, will be similar like that. And this is typically, I think right now our plan is to send this report roughly 1 to 2 weeks, depends. We're still doing this by batch. So it won't happen immediately right now. So 1 to 2 weeks, you probably will receive an email. And do a self-review, use a summary statistic and everything figure and to do a review, especially focusing on the whatever return warning and fail. I would say fail for sure. Warning depends. Take a look when possible. And reply this email, just Daniel just showed you earlier, and try to do this once you receive the initial QQC email, roughly 1 week. This is not a very tight deadline. Just we want to make sure we capture all the emails. So try to reply the email within a week when possible. But if you're running late, it's totally fine. It's okay. Just tell us a little bit. A couple options, right, could happen when you reply the email. I think there's a couple scenarios could happen. So everything is good. So all the statistic return okay. So it's always good. Go ahead. Will be one possible scenario. Second one will be, yeah, this will happen a lot. Will be everything is good. There are some warning or maybe fail in the table, but you can provide a very brief description about why they are okay based on your best knowledge. Try to be brief. Don't write a long report when possible. We totally understand what's going on, so a brief description would be sufficient. When the case, sometimes you might need to resubmit your data. That's okay. Just reply the email. Just briefly explain why and just tell us when you're going to resubmit your data. So we won't work on this QQC run result. Last is this might happen is sometimes you just overwhelmed or you just don't understand what's going on for some of the check module. It's totally okay. Just send us an email about, okay, I don't understand this part. Let's maybe talk about this through email, or maybe let's schedule a brief meeting about this. This is a typical timeline for you to plan, right? When you prepare your data, upload your data, and a couple of days you might receive an email invitation about the user feedback section or not, depends. And 1 or 2 weeks, you probably receive the QQC report email. And ideally, you can try to review everything and return the email by 1 week. And if anything happens, you just you might go through a loop. Last, Rachel, you want to talk about the user feedback section?
Sure. I just wanted to say that this process is new for all of us. So Hassan, Danielle, Yue, and I all wanted to make it work as well for you as possible. So for that reason, we'll be reaching out to several of you to learn how it works for you and for your data. The best way to do that will be for you to share your responses in the session in real time, ideally starting when you first open the email message, similar to what Danielle showed today. So watch for email messages about feedback sessions. Of course, we'd like to have sessions with each of you, but we're constrained by schedules. So whether you participate in the session or not, we want to hear from you about your insights and your concerns. You can send feedback when you want to AmeriFlux support at LPL. And thanks again for being part of this.
Thanks, Rachel. So I think that concludes our presentation for today's workshop. I'm going to stop sharing. before everyone take off, just thanks everyone to join us today. Any last question or comment about the QA/QC process or anything? And I hope the last part of the presentation answer the question to Daphne and Stephen. Anything else? Okay. If not, then let's end this workshop. And thanks everyone again for joining and supporting this new experimental process. We're going to have fun this summer. Okay, stay tuned, everyone. Okay.